Okay, we'll start in a minute's time. Good evening, Toastmaster Marian, Toastmaster Kudus. Welcome to our regular Friday role players training session. We have the right people here, our Vice President of Education for the very first one, which is planning the agenda. We learn better when we enjoy what we're doing. And the simple way to enjoy what we're doing is to not be stressed about the time. And one of the easy ways that happens is when the Vice President's Education or whoever is in charge of planning the agenda plans it properly. One of the ways we're familiar with is allocating time to different roles, to different speakers. That is quite straightforward. When you have someone delivering a speech of 5 to 7 minutes, generally on the agenda, you see speech and you see the time allotted, 5 to 7 minutes. When it's time for table topics, you know it's 1 to 2 minutes. That is the time that's allotted, 1 to 2 minutes. And it goes down that way for the evaluation of prepared speeches, table topics evaluation, and other role players. Now, the issue is when you attend a meeting that the time has been properly allocated, like one of the meetings I attended, the assumption some people have, especially when you're just starting to plan an agenda, is that you have planned the agenda well. Unfortunately, by the time your meeting concludes, if everyone shows up for that meeting, you discover that you went well over the time that was allotted to you, which for most of us, 2 hours. Why is this the case? For that particular meeting I attended, I don't think anyone went over time. There was maybe a speaker that was supposed to speak 5 to 7 minutes that spoke for about 7 minutes, 16 seconds. In fact, one of the speakers, because he took some time to set up the camera, he spoke for less than the minimum time, which was 5 minutes. He spoke for 4 minutes and just some seconds because he used about a minute to set up. But we still went over the allotted time. Now, what is the issue? You need to plan for everything that is going to take up your time. And what do I mean by this? Plan for transitions. If it's strictly a physical meeting, the time between when someone is called up and they walk up to the lectern and they now commence speaking, that time needs to be planned for, that transition time. If it's a virtual meeting, you need to plan for when someone turns on their camera, if they're going to do that, and perhaps network glitches, which means when I introduce someone, it's not at the point of introduction that they commence speaking. That gap in between needs to be properly planned for. Usually, this is the structure of our meetings. Sergeant-at-Arms is the one that starts the meeting, hands over to the president, hands over to the Toastmaster of the day, who now introduces the general evaluator. The general evaluator introduces their team members. And then depending on the structure of your club, it's either prepared speeches or table topics, ending with evaluations overall. And the general evaluator who anchors the evaluation portion finally hands over to the Toastmaster of the day before handing control back to the president. Every single time someone new is introduced, you have time you have to plan for. Sergeant-at-Arms, President, Toastmaster of the Day, GE, our counter, timekeeper, listening evaluator, if you have that, grammarian, back to the GE. So there are lots of people that are going to be introduced. Minimum, and I'm saying what is you should have 30 seconds more. Personally, I advise that 1 minute is a good starting point. That's for me. For the worst case scenario, at least have 30 seconds for transition. If it's a hybrid meeting, I think you should allot more time if you have people both in the physical space and the virtual space. Why do I recommend this? You are going to be working with devices that require that people in the virtual space can hear those in the physical room, and those in the physical room can hear those in the virtual space. You need to have some allowance to ensure that those minor hitches do not take you well over the time that you have planned for that meeting. Note, when you have a day, maybe it's strictly table topics, and you allot about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Let's guess, how many speakers do you think you can get for 30 minutes table topics? Well-planned table topics segment. And when I say well-planned, I mean before the meeting, the table topics master already spoke to guests, maybe spoke to Toastmasters, but especially guests, telling them about the beauty of speaking during the table topics segment and getting them to volunteer to speak. No time will be wasted during the table topics portion of the meeting asking for volunteers. That's what I mean by a well-planned table topics segment. If you already have your list of speakers, if you have 30 minutes, let's take about 2 minutes off in the beginning, 2 minutes off at the end for introduction and for conclusion. That leaves us with 26 minutes. If you have 26 minutes for table topics, and now remember, you're probably going to have to plan for some transitions, you can get perhaps 8, 9 speakers, maybe a bit more, when you have 30 minutes strictly for table topics. Take about 8. Because you can have so many speakers, you have a lot more time to plan for transition. You're now looking at, whereas before for table topics, you might have allocated 2 minutes, 3 minutes for transition. Now you're looking 8, 9, 10 minutes. What am I trying to explain and emphasize? The more speakers you have coming out to speak, the more time you need for transition. When planning the agenda, a great starting point that I recommend personally is to have 3/4 of your time for speaking, 1/4 of your time for transition strictly. Meaning, when you look at all the time and you add it together, it should not be more than 3/4 of the time allotted for your meeting, because you've allocated time for transition. And if it's a meeting where you have way more speakers, the 1/4 should go up, 3/4 should come down. If you have fewer speakers, for instance, if it's a training and maybe you have 1 or 2 trainers, you don't need much time for transition because there are only 1 or 2 people that really will be introduced during the meeting. Your 1/4 should go way down. This is how you plan a proper agenda. All time should be accounted for. Time that will be used speaking and time that will not be used speaking. When you combine these two and you account for them on your agenda, most of the time, your meeting is going to keep to time. If you don't account for the time that's not going to be used to speak, most of the time, if everyone shows up, your meeting is definitely not going to keep to time. To ensure that everyone can enjoy the meeting, properly play their roles without thinking, will I have sufficient time? Will our meeting keep to time? Please take the time to plan the agenda. I'm glad we have a view vice president education here who are generally responsible for planning the agenda. If you're not the vice president education, this may not be something that is in your purview for now, but when you get to that point, this is very important to have. And beyond knowing, please put it into practice. The way you know you've learned something is when you actually start practicalizing it. I would love to attend more meetings and see well-planned agendas because the transition time has been properly planned for. That is the brief I have on planning your agenda properly. Do we have any questions? You can either raise your hand or type in the chat box if you have a question or a comment regarding planning the agenda for a meeting. Please go ahead, Toastmaster Kudus.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it's just it's like a question and also a comment, because many times, even if the agenda is well planned, I still think it still sits with the Toastmaster of the day on how the time is well managed, because I've seen meetings where the agenda is not as good and the Toastmaster of the day is able to marvel around it. And I've seen meetings where the agenda is actually good, but the Toastmaster of the day just kept on and in the end, we still have to shoot beyond the time. How how can we get the Toastmaster of the day? How can we ensure that it's the time is being managed? If, even if our agenda is well planned, how can we ensure that the Toastmaster of the day um goes well with the agenda and the time is well spent? So that's just the question. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kudus, thank you so much for that question slash comment. Sometimes the agenda is well planned, but unfortunately, Toastmaster of the day does not utilize the time properly. Toastmaster of the day is able to maneuver things to ensure. How can you ensure that the Toastmaster of the day does their job well? One, it would be good to get Toastmaster of the day who knows how to play that role. Someone who is trained and likes to get themselves better trained to play the role. That's probably the easiest thing. Unfortunately, not many of us are trained to play these roles. We've been doing this role players training for a while. Not many people show up. They play roles in our clubs, and you attend and you're shocked by the quality of some roles that are played, but they had the opportunity to learn, they did not. If somebody is playing the role of Toastmaster of the day, I recommend that they are trained to play that role. Working with a mentor, showing up for training, and someone else just checking up on them. Maybe a more experienced Toastmaster in their club ensures that they know how to play the role. And part of that may just be getting proper feedback when they play the role. Now, in the meeting itself, the president or the general evaluator may have to be the one to address the Toastmaster of the day. When they leave the lectern, either the president or the general evaluator can address them and let them know you are going well above time. I see this happening repeatedly. I'm not sure the thinking, but I'm guessing for some people, it's more about nature. They like to speak a lot. For some, because they've put in all this effort into preparing for that meeting, they want to display what they've prepared for. And unfortunately, they do this at the peril of the entire meeting, not keeping to time, which is not good. The evaluation should be given afterwards so they can improve. Thank you so much for that observation, Toastmaster Kudus. Toastmaster Richard, please go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay,
Good evening.
I wanted to know, is it not possible for the timer to play a role there also in reminding the Toastmaster of the day that is going beyond the time? Because the timer has the plan, and the timer can also monitor it to make sure that all the role players are keeping to time.
Thank you so much. What the timer does in a meeting is display the cards. Once the timer displays the red card, Unfortunately, sometimes certain people keep going. I was in a meeting where the Toastmaster of the day said, no, I'm doing this, I'm explaining this, meaning I'm ignoring the card. The timer is not going to say stop. The timer doesn't have that power in that meeting. They can display their card, they can just show it up there, but that's about it. Beyond that, when they leave the lectern, somebody needs to address it if it's really bad. And ideally, that probably falls with the president or the general evaluator. The timer's role is just to keep track of time for each segment, and the power is about the cards, really. Now, if you're friends, by all means, go ahead and address that, but you cannot, as the timer, tell the Toastmaster of the day, stop right now. You've gone well beyond time. No, that's not going to happen. So utilize your cards well. And if you do that, hopefully the person speaking will respect what you've shown and then quickly terminate whatever it is they're saying. If you have other questions or comments regarding planning the agenda, you can ask it at the end when we're done. We're done by 9:30, or you can type it in the chat box. Now we're going to address this very important role called the Toastmaster of the day. What do you do as the Toastmaster of the day? And I'm breaking this into 3 parts: before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. The Toastmaster of the day actually plays multiple roles. You are the MC, happen to be the host, you happen to be the chief timer of the meeting, which is why Toastmaster Kudus made that point that even when the agenda is poorly planned, the Toastmaster of the day can maneuver things to ensure you keep within time. Now, what should the Toastmaster of the day do before the meeting? The Toastmaster of the day, please note that your job, in my opinion, is to help people better focus on the speakers and other role players. When you have this in mind, there are certain things you should do before the meeting. And what are some of these things? First, you need to come up with your presentation explaining what you do. Let people know that you're there to help them go through the agenda, which for me is the major summary. Whatever form you want your speech to take, please let it take that format: introduction, body, conclusion. You can have your quotes there, but keep it within the allotted time. You're also going to be explaining to people in the room who we are as Toastmasters, because we may have first-time guests. Now, if you don't have first-time guests, you don't need to say this, because Toastmasters already know who we are as Toastmasters before joining. They know who we are. If you want to tell them things about your club specifically, that is okay. Personally, a preference I have is stating certain rules from the very start. If the Sergeant at Arms didn't state those rules, so I prepared the rules in advance, I like the rules to infuse some type of humor. What are some of these rules? Telling people to either put their phone on vibrate or silent. And you can tell them, you can put it on vibrate if you're expecting $1 billion to hit your account. Just something small that can bring about some form of humor. I tell them to fully engage in the meeting. If they're made to laugh, let them laugh. If they're made to cry, let them cry as much as they want to, flood the room. Simple rules that will let them know what they are permitted to do and also elicit some form of laughter. It's important, as far as I'm concerned, to state these rules. When you go to a meeting for the first time, you may not know what is permitted and what is not permitted. It makes it so much easier to relax and be fully involved when you know what is permitted. If the Sergeant at Arms does not cover it, please, as the Toastmaster of the day, take a few moments to help people know these are the things that are acceptable at this meeting. You then explain what the order of the meeting is going to be, generally speaking. Note all these things you're preparing in advance before the meeting starts. What else will you do before the meeting starts? Those people you're going to introduce, please reach out to them if you're unfamiliar with them and confirm the pronunciation of their names. Get their brief introductions. Note, emphasis on brief introductions. Some people may have introductions as long as 1 page. 2 pages, 3 pages, and I kid you not. You do not have 1, 2, 3 minutes to be reading introductions, especially how most of our agendas are planned. So you may have to truncate it in such a way that it may take maybe 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute, hopefully not that long, to introduce someone. You need to be familiar with all this before the meeting commences. This is part of how you prepare. You can also ensure, if it's someone playing the role of general evaluator for the first time, maybe they're not very cognizant of what they're supposed to do, please confirm that they are going to reach out to their team members, get their introduction, get the proper pronunciation of their names before the meeting commences. Now, if they know what to do, you don't need to reach out to the GE. You can just confirm that they are prepared and their team is prepared. All this before the meeting. Also, please encourage people to show up early, not on time, early, which ideally, I think about 30 minutes early if it's a physical meeting. Otherwise, 15 minutes early is probably fine. And the reason for this is you want to know who's available and if there's a need to get a replacement for those roles. And you don't want to know that 1 minute to the meeting start time. At that point, you're rushing, you may not make it, and we want to start on time. All these before the meeting commences. Also, please look at the agenda. Look at the flow of the agenda. Look at who is playing what roles. Look at the timing. Was the agenda properly prepared to ensure that we keep to the time allotted for the entire meeting? If you observe that it was not, then reach out to whoever planned it, which most likely will be the Vice President Education. If it can still be tweaked, that'll be perfect. If not, you're already preparing in advance to make some amends. Unfortunately, most of the time, it's probably going to go away from the table topics part of the meeting, which is not good. That is one of my favorite parts of the meeting, and it fully engages people, both Toastmasters and guests. I'd rather not do that, but it's one of the parts that has to pay. You can't exactly truncate prepared speeches. So please look at the agenda and be very familiar with the flow of it, timing, and if in general, everything was well prepared, all before the meeting. During the meeting, what you do? First, show up early, please. You're leading a team, lead by example, come and connect, familiarize yourself with the room. If it's a physical room, if it's virtual, be there, let people see that you're there. Engage members as well as guests. Not only is it getting you warmed up, helping you relax, because you are the host, the Toastmaster of the day, you're getting to know people, and you're also helping first-time guests acclimatize with the meeting before it even starts. Another thing it does that many of us don't think about, it helps you actually have some content to use to refer to during the course of the meeting. You can refer to people by name and comments they said by name, and it's a great way to learn how to speak. It improves your communication. All this in advance before the meeting commences. Finally, just before, because you're early, you know who needs to be replaced. And you're able to do that with the people available, or just give more than one role to different Toastmasters that are already playing roles. The popular term, Toastmaster wears many hats. You cannot do this if you are also running late. When the meeting starts, our usual structure, the sergeant at arms starts the meeting, hands over to the president, who now hands over to you, and you give your introduction that you've prepared well for. And then you introduce the general evaluator, who introduces their team before handing back to you, and you continue with the rest of the meeting. You go to the prepared speech if that's what your meeting is starting with. For the prepared speeches, first, you call on the evaluators to tell us your speaker. And you go through this sequence until all the speakers are done for the prepared speeches. When that is done, if you are voting in your club, you ask the timer for feedback on the time If anyone didn't keep to time, they are disqualified from being voted for, and then you vote for all the other speakers. Now move into the table topics portion of the meeting. Introduce the table topics master who anchors table topics portion of the meeting. After that is done, control is handed back to you, and you now segue finally to the evaluation portion of the meeting by calling back the general evaluator, not introducing, because the general evaluator was introduced previously. Hand control back to general evaluator, who takes us through the evaluation portion of the meeting before finally handing control back to you. At this point, you have your concluding speech, which you should have prepared in advance, or you could have tweaked it based on what happened during the course of the meeting, and then you hand back control to the president, who finally closes out the meeting. This is what you do during the meeting. Finally, after the meeting, because I said before, during, and after the meeting, because you lead a team, I highly recommend appreciate your team members. Meet them in person to appreciate them, call them, send a voice note, send a message. That is my preference of appreciating people. If you send a message, which is the lowest for me, people may not get the emotion that you want to convey in the appreciation message. But when they speak to you in person, or they hear your voice on a phone call, or hear your voice on a voice note, it's preferable over just a message. And in summary, that is what the Toastmaster of the day does. Note, I mentioned that they are the chief timekeeper, which means they are always paying attention to the time. Based on where we are we aligned with the agenda? If we are well beyond, then you have to start shortening things. You have to emphasize that people should please keep to time if they've not been doing that. You should also please not be verbose when you come out to speak. Keep it as succinct as possible once you're over time. And then you may have to truncate the table topics portion, which I don't like. But if there's a need to ensure you keep to the time allotted for the entire meeting, Toastmaster of the day, that is your responsibility. You may also have to truncate some other things like the evaluation. I do not recommend this. I hope we don't get to that point, but you do need to pay attention and figure out what can we do to ensure at the end of the day, the entire meeting keeps within time. And if you play your role very well, more times than not, the meeting will keep within time. People will be able to deliver their speeches, play their roles, learn a lot, and have a lot of fun. This is a summary of what the Toastmaster of the day does. Does anyone have a question or a comment? Once again, you can raise your hands or you can type in the chat box with your question or comment for the role of Toastmaster of the day. I don't see any question in the chat box, and I don't see any hands raised. That means we are done for today. We covered planning the agenda and playing the role of Toastmaster of the day. My recommendation, if you've not played the role of Toastmaster of the day and you have attended multiple meetings, meaning you know the flow of the meeting, and you feel, I am not good enough to play this role, please, you are exactly the person that needs to play the role. We learn here at Toastmasters by doing. You don't learn by hearing, you don't learn by attending trainings, you actually learn by doing. Please take the plunge. Worst case scenario, just take people through the agenda. You don't have to add stories, you don't have to add anything else. By the time you do it once and all you do is introduction and take people through the agenda, you realize it's not as difficult as you thought. Keep doing it, you get better, you get more creative, you relax more, and you can infuse as much as you want, all within time, of course. And you may just start enjoying it, who knows? if you are one of those people that fall into the category of what I just explained, please sign up. Sign up before your fear prevents you from signing up. Sooner rather than later. And get someone to just help you prepare. You will do a fantastic job. We're here every Friday. Generally, we cover 2 topics, mainly 2 roles. Sometimes we cover things like planning the agenda or maybe preparing for a speech contest. If any of the things we're going to cover for that day is of interest to you, please join us. Learn, put into practice, improve yourself as well as your club. On that note, we are done for today. I think I kept my promise. It's 9:29 at the moment. If you have some other questions, please feel free to wait behind. We'll use a few minutes to tackle that. Otherwise, go and rest, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Toastmasters meeting, or just go and have some fun out there. Thank you so much for showing up. Those of you that still have questions, you can wait behind. And to the best of my ability, I'll attend to those questions. If you still have questions, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I think people should now start dropping. But since you're here, I'm assuming some people want to ask questions or listen to the answers of questions people might have. All right. Thank you, Toastmaster Victoria. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Very much welcome. Any other questions? Or
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome, Toastmaster Kudus. Is this a question or you're giving thanks?
Giving thanks.
All right. I'm going to assume there's no more question. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see some of you tomorrow at the club officers training. Take care.
Okay, sir. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Welcome.